Right, people, Mathys Tel is on the market. And when we're talking about market opportunities, he is a big old juicy one. We're going to get into the story of who he is, what's his style of play, and importantly, we're going to have a look on the tactics board and go through my thoughts. That's the whole point of this channel, is to have that conversation with you. I'm going to run through 4 different teams. Here's 2 of them. And there's another 2. I'm also going to talk about a 5th one that I just don't think is worth talking about, if that makes sense, because I don't think it's the right fit, and I think he also agrees with that. And then we'll talk about how he would fit and just explore it a little bit, because he's a really exciting player. So why are people so excited about him? Well, when it comes to the top 5 leagues, since he went to Bayern Munich, no one has a higher goals and assists per 90 than he does. He is a really exciting 19-year-old who's 6 foot or 5'10", depending on who you listen to. He's a player who has not played a lot of minutes for Bayern Munich. And so when you look at some elements of the stats, it's one where not really sure about this guy, because look, he can't get a game. The point is that at Bayern Munich, they've invested a lot of money in their front line. And a lot of those players are doing well so far this season. And they're in a league where they're really pushing for it when it comes to the Bundesliga. And the Champions League, of course, as well, was a bit of a strain on them. They're not in the Pokal as well anymore. So he's not going to get the same amount of minutes that he might have done last season. In terms of style of play, there are a lot of comparisons with him and Thierry Henry. I think football's a bit different now, and also him being at Bayern Munich, they're a very dominant team, and that's shown by his heat map, which I did want to kind of touch on, because I think what's interesting here is that everyone will talk about him as a left winger, and that's what we've seen. I think there's so much more to him than that. So this is his heat map, and if I scroll up, this is obviously from 24-25, okay? So let me scroll down, and you can see the pockets that he likes to get into. He likes to start wide, really comfortable kind of drifting in, but also you can see that little hotspot by the corner flag. Really good at going down the line and getting a yard and putting in a really good cross. I really like the way that he can cross with both feet. That said, last year he kind of had more rave reviews. So let's have a look at his heat map from last year, because I think that will show you something that I think is really important that other people won't talk about before we even get into the tactics of these 4 Premier League teams. I'll give you a clue there. So what you can see here is that he can play on both sides of the pitch and through the middle as well. And that is why he is so interesting, exciting, and such an opportunity for anyone who gets him. The other thing that I really like is that he's not happy with the amount of minutes that he's getting. And so even though he's at Bayern Munich and he's in and amongst it, he's getting fed up. You know, there were sort of talks about how apparently they'd spoken with his agent and him, and everyone was happy. But at the same time, he's obviously not happy, because he's got less minutes this season, 256 minutes, which is less than the number 2 goalkeeper. So for someone who has not the stats, but the ability that he has, and there's so little that we've seen, you know, to go back to it one more time, actually, because he basically played 20 odd minutes for Rennes and then off he went. That's how excited they were. And so if you go the year before, again, you can see him on both sides. But yeah, so he's got that ability to play on both sides. But all we've seen in the last year or so is this. And it is a good illustration of what he is as a player, because he does love to cut in. He likes to cut in and get that shot off as well. Actually, maybe we go to the tactics board. It might be a bit easier to kind of highlight his movement a little bit. And he's really exciting as a player, because he's got that kind of all those physical attributes that you want. He's got the zip. Obviously, we're going to touch on Arsenal. We'll come back to Arsenal probably, but as a player, like, he will start off in these wide positions, and then because of the teams that he's playing against, who've often got 2 banks of 4 and 5 possibly, he's got a lot to do here. And so in terms of him working down that line, what I did want to show you was that actually someone like Martinelli, now when we get to Arsenal, we'll talk about the comparisons between the 2, but if you look at his heat map just for a second, what you can see is that actually he's obviously getting a lot more minutes and a lot more opportunities, but he does still bomb down that. He's able to go both ways, but he probably doesn't come inside as much as Mathys Tel. But the question is he even going to play in that position? As I've shown you from his heat map, he can play through the middle. He can play on the right if you need him to, and he can play on that left where he's probably the most comfortable. And the comparisons that you often get with him are with Thierry Henry. So let's start with this team, Tottenham. Tottenham, have you found your Thierry Henry? Fascinating stuff. There's a lot of interest from a lot of clubs. I'll tell you what we'll just get rid of straight off the bat is Chelsea. Chelsea doesn't work for me at all. And this is the other thing that I like about Mathys Tel is that he is getting annoyed. He's getting annoyed by the lack of minutes that he's getting. And that's because it's stacked in those areas. And he just got caned over the last 2 seasons. Probably would have got more minutes. But probably got more minutes last year than a proper number 2 because he was so young. But now he's feeling like he's good enough to play at the level. He wants to move on, and I really, really like that. But he does have that Thierry Henry vibe, but it's a different game these days. So it's probably what we might have seen Thierry Henry look to do and where he might be put in a modern-day side. Because if you think about what he did at Barcelona, and obviously his general idea, his general love of drifting into those kind of areas, Thierry Henry was generally playing in a 2, wasn't he? And so he was sort of then being able to come here and then cut back and do the old pa 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 pa, which he loves to do, by the way. Tel loves that little cut in and get the shot away because he's quite sort of rangy, but he's also got like real zip about him, and because he's not too tall, it doesn't take him too long to get moving. Also, really happy to go down the line as well, and a really nice cross with either foot. I really, really like that about him. And actually, the more you look at it, the more that's kind of a underutilized element of his game, because people talk about him as this sort of fox in the box, and he has got that about him. And so, with these different teams, like how will he be employed? So, what's interesting, I think, with a few of these is you've got so many options down the road as well. Because let's start off with Tottenham. So Tottenham, it seems, want him on a permanent basis. They're looking at a £60 million deal at the moment, according to the reports that I'm seeing here. And what I like about this from Tottenham's point of view is these young, exciting players that you've got, it's one where this is an opportunity here. I think whoever gets this guy, you've got a bit of a superstar in your hands. Went through Clairefontaine, so really, sounds not someone called Claire Fontaine. He went through the youth system at Clairefontaine, okay, in France, where all these wonderful players come through. So how would he fit at Tottenham? Crashing on. So the midfield, I think what's interesting here, and I'm literally just going to explore this with you guys, so hopefully you enjoy it, and if you do enjoy it, make sure you hit the subscribe button. So much more content coming on, and it is a place for me to just have that conversation with you guys. But with Tottenham, so he can play here, he can play through the middle, he can play on the other side. I think with this, what's interesting to me, from a Tottenham point of view, is if you can get him on a permanent, because we're going to talk about Man United, we'll talk about Arsenal, and just Tell himself, does he really want to go out on loan, or does he want to go out loan to certain clubs based on certain scenarios? If he goes to Tottenham and they can sell the dream, despite them being where they are in the league right now, and say, look, that's a blip, it's about the injuries, the cavalry's coming, but you're so much better than Timo Werner, for example, and you have that superstar status that you can be better than Brennan Johnson. You can be pushing it with, you can certainly be ahead of Richarlison, we would have thought, right? Obviously do different things, kind of. Yeah. And obviously give Solanke an absolute run for your money. Like, in terms of what he wants to do, he wants to play games. So, and then in terms of Heung-min Son, you've got a player who I think we've seen the first moments of, you're struggling a little bit here in terms of energy and be able to get through the game, especially for a manager like Ange Postecoglou at the time of recording. So what he could do, and with the rotations that you have, let's forget injuries for a second. I think, look, if he comes straight away, and if you haven't got Solanke available, he could absolutely play up front because he has the strength overall and these lovely long legs to be able to hold up the ball, bring players in, and what he's got is real pace. So he can spin. He can lay it off to the right kind of players and spin. And it might be one that I think Maddison would really enjoy having him in the team. I really think that. Kulusevski, does that change his role? I don't know. I think we've got too many players here, so let's just sort that out first. So the Kulusevski role could be part of this. And this is the thing, you've got an 11, but then you've got so much more than that. So at the moment, you've got someone like Richarlison knocking about. You could play Heung-min Son through the middle, which he's had a lot of joy in that position. Play Tel on this natural position on the left-hand side. Is that less running for Heung-min Son in terms of doggies, back and forth, back and forth? Yes, you're not going to get the same output as Solanke, but then in time when Solanke comes in, then it's a straight shootout on this side. But if you still want Heung-min Son on that side, is it one where Kulusevski then steps into this midfield? I think you should give Bergvall the keys. There's a sort of ripple effect from it. I'm not trying to chuck the promo in, but the podcast is readily available. But he can play on that right-hand side as well, like this season. And does that allow Kulusevski to be his best self in this triangle here, which I know we've seen a lot of joy with those three and the rotation they can offer. It's not working now. I like him at Spurs. I like the idea of him at Spurs. And the thing that matters hugely here, I think, for Tel is minutes. Or Minuten in German. He's French. I don't know what it is in French. I think he can play on the right-hand side. He can absolutely do that because he can make these driving runs. And what Tottenham like to do a lot of the time is overload a different side of the pitch. And so if you think of the role that Brennan Johnson has a lot of the time, that's absolutely something that he could do. That's absolutely something he could do. Make those runs. Because that's exactly what he does on this side a lot of the time. When the ball's on the other side, he doesn't just wait here. He really does look to be in line with this 18-yard box and then be ready to sort of poach because he does have those natural instincts and his finishing is wonderful. His finishing is really, really wonderful. So Tottenham, it works. It absolutely works. And it's going to work for most of these teams, let's be honest. It's the context. That's what I think is really important. And how his role would be different. I think you could see him in all three areas along here. And I think he'd have a good time. And I think you can fit him in. There's so many spots for him, especially with the injuries that they're having right now. Let's move over to Man United. Different questions to be answered here. Dorgu, I've put in here. Obviously, he's going to be playing, you think, in time, bombing up and down. The centre-back position, not too important right now. Is Maguire on his way out? Do you take Maguire out and put Mazraoui here and put Delo on this side? Fill your boots. I think that's absolutely fine. And Mainu, of course, let's get Diallo in here as well. So you're going to want Diallo here at some point. But do you want him here with Fernandes? Let's get Mainu back in the team here. Make sure we've got the right amount of players. 4, 2, 3, yep. And at the moment, it's Højlund up front. Højlund's body language is really off at the moment. When it comes to Tel here, like we've seen from the heat map, he's playing for a team that isn't playing in the same kind of situation or formation. So this one I'm struggling with a little bit. And this is why this one for me is not a permanent. Not just because Man United can't afford it, but I don't think it's right for anyone, really. He's going to have to step into positions that he's not going to be totally familiar with, and we've certainly not seen him, but he's an exciting talent. So I don't see a huge problem in getting him if you can get him. I know that apparently they're focusing on getting players out the door at the moment, but the explosive play that you can get from him, his ability to dribble, does make him exciting. Where do you play him? That's the question. And where are you trying to play everyone else? That's another question. Are we moving towards an idea where, if you wanted to play him as a 10, let's take Fernandes out for a second. If you want to play him here, how are you getting Fernandes back in the team? Because Fernandes has to play. Does that mean, is that the future for him? Is Fernandes part of a 2? Is that the best way to have him? Because that pairing is really important. You do get that energy from him. He does want to play those passes in behind. He can see those passes in behind as well. Has he got more energy than Mainu? I think it's certainly up for debate. I was chatting to Joe Thompson about this. He loves the idea. He says Fernandes has to play here. Because the problem you have when he plays here is he does want to drop deep. And so you're kind of clogging it a little bit. And what you do by having him in the 2 now is it allows you to have, obviously, Diallo in the team. A proper wing-back in Delo. I think Mazraoui, there's a decision to be made there in terms of bringing him in to play as a right-sided centre-back, because I think that's where he played a little bit better. And I think he's gone off the ball a little bit now, but that's a different conversation. It's not too important. So with Tel, I think you could play him in this position and kind of play, let's say, the sort of Garnacho role, but with a Rashford twist. Now, there's been a lot of talk about him being similar to Rashford. And, yeah, I see it, and I get it. And I guess it's one where, in terms of that energy and fearlessness to go and make an impression of what we, from what we saw from Rashford a few years ago, that's maybe what you're going to see here. And so from that point of view, I think it's exciting. Generally, I think he starts out better out here and then stepping in. And if you've got Dorgu playing here, I think recently we've had Mazraoui on this side, and actually you saw it was effective enough because he would step into this area and Garnacho would then step out into that wide area. Is that a road he wants to go down because he trusts someone like Mazraoui? But if you're going to bring in Dorgu for the money, you're going to bring him in. Surely you've got to play him. So is there a different route that you want to take with him? And is it this? Is Højlund out? Now, his body language in the last game, I just thought was like, oof, that's a bit different. And in terms of that profile of losing Rashford and having that player with the pace of Tel and wanting him to almost play as, a second striker a little bit, I think there's something available there that could be really good. And we have seen it before, and it could be this. Let's forget the midfield situation for a second, but let's just do it. Fernandes, let's put him in there. Say you did this. What you have got is two players who have the capability. Diallo is able to get the ball and drive, or start out wide and drive in, whatever you want him to do. Probably got the energy to get past him as well, but generally will probably come this way a little bit. Fernandes is going to be looking for those passes. Xerxes drops in, Tel goes. That was something that I saw in the Everton game. We did a video on it, and it was Rashford and Xerxes. And between the two of them, you actually had a player that you had sort of both sides of what you want. A player who's, who's going to come this way. A player who's going to come this way, and a player who wants to go that way, or is happy to go that way as well, or also, run these channel runs as well. So that is an option in terms of like utilising the squad and getting the best out of them, just to have that ability to stretch up the pitch. That has been a huge problem because Fernandes is playing here, but he's dropping deeper. He's always going to be looking for a pass, and it feels like Højlund's on his own a lot of the time. The other route, as we said, Mainu here, Tel as that central striker, can do it. Can absolutely do it. He is going to be probably looking more for that. But I don't think that's the end of the world. And actually, I think with Højlund, I've been a bit disappointed because he's had to go this way a bit too much, in my opinion. But if you have got the likes of Diallo and Fernandes in those pockets, having this kind of player here, and let's bring Dorgu back in, providing that width here and here. This is what we've, all been talking about from the start. And you can allow him to be that poacher. What I don't like is him having to come in and hit the ground running. I think that's a lot of pressure on the lad. Man United would take it, and I think he's got the personality to deal with it. But not for me, Jeff. So Tottenham, yes, dangerous. But in terms of development, opportunity, yes. Man United, not for me, Jeff. Aston Villa. Let's talk Aston Villa, because I think they're interesting here as well. Now, think of the back four. You then have that two in midfield. Onana would step in sometimes. McGinn. And then on the right-hand side, you've got... It's a funny one, because Watkins often sort of drives into this area or gets himself into the box. The wide player be that... Marlon's through the door now. Bailey has probably been the main man generally. Those two players, you want them to get on and sort of hold that width for you on that right-hand side. Luca Dean is generally the guy who kind of holds the width on this side, but he doesn't go too far to the byline. And some players that maybe aren't getting enough credit, I absolutely love him. And this is the question for Aston Villa as much as Tel. Because I think you could convince Tel, come in, you're going to play. Because Duran... I don't know if it's done yet, but it looks like it's pretty much done. He's going, which is wild, by the way. But great money for Villa. But there's a player here that I think is being slept on a little bit, which we'll come to. Now, where could Tel play? So if you think of how they generally play, you could play here and then Dean could tuck in a little bit. Could be a bit more careful with that. And of course, Tel can go that way and Dean can still bomb on. So it would be one where he's probably going to end up more in these spaces by the end of it. But initially, maybe start wide, which would be different for Aston Villa. It's not really what you see a lot of the time, which I'll talk about in a sec. He could play over on this right-hand side, but then you've just bought, Marlon. I don't really get the idea of putting him there. What is nice is the backup to Watkins, especially if Duran's just gone. It gives you that squad depth there with the players really good, but can play in different positions for you. The thing that's difficult here is you could absolutely play, you play him here and you play him instead of Ramsey. Now, I'm getting upset just taking him out. Let's take Marlon out for a second. Ramsey is one hell of a player. One hell of a player. And what you get, and you saw it time and again, let's take Tel out for a sec, is that Ramsey drops deep here, Rodgers drops deeps here, and then just spins and goes back. And the sort of timing of the run, he's not sprinting too much, and maybe you go, or maybe you want a bit more pace. And that's a real, in terms of options, go get Tel if you can get Tel. It's fine, because you bring him out, then you kind of play up against them just a little bit more, but he's one that can kind of cut in. But also, I think what's great about him is that he could sort of start there, step into here, and then run in behind, and Watkins could step into these areas a little bit more. Generally, Watkins sort of stays up and works into this channel. So with Tel kind of stepping into that gives a different sort of angle to it, and Rodgers can continue to drop a little bit deeper or concentrate on this side and let Watkins go over to that side. But I just do love Ramsey and what he offers the team, because you're kind of playing with 2 10s here, and the sort of drive that he offers the team is really nice. I do just think that sometimes this area of the pitch is not attacked in a huge way. And if Watkins has to come out there, then you've not got the same kind of guy with the sniff that Watkins has. And so I don't mind Tel. Initially, I thought Villa was a shout. You maybe need to play a little bit different. But look, you can have overlapping runs from Luca Dean. And Tel, in terms of being a superstar there, I think you could sell him that. And they're in a solid place in the league, a better place in the league than Tottenham right now. I just don't... I'd like to know what Villa fans feel about his development. You don't want to lose where he's going. And also, these two as a pairing, I really enjoy them. Would the money be spent better elsewhere? Maybe. But if you can get a superstar in Tel, do you just go and get a superstar in Tel? So, kind of caught on the fence here. Emery would figure it out. They might have to play a little bit differently. But I really like Ramsey. I think he offers so much. I think he sort of goes hidden under the radar a lot. And obviously, great to see him back now. So good against Celtic. It would be sad to see his development kind of dry up a little bit, especially with the way the team's set up. It really is set up for it to work really well with Ramsey and the team. And I think you've seen that in recent results and also recent performances, certainly by him. So I'm on the fence with it. Do it if you could do it. But he generally is going to play out wide and then cut in here. So yeah, you got the overlap, but not totally sure from a squad depth point of view. I like it. So I don't hate it. I like it more than Man United. Not the same spotlight. Probably will get minutes. But they've got a few numbers up there. We haven't even spoken about McGinn. And then there's Arsenal. So Arsenal, I've got to say, this feels perfect for Arsenal. You can gazump Spurs, which is always, I imagine is always a bit of a joy. But in terms of the setup of Arsenal and what they need, I like it a lot. They're interested. They bid 60 million for Watkins yesterday. I think with the age of Tel and the ceiling that he's got, but also his ability to, when you are, let's put him on that left wing for a second. And as we say, can go play on the right wing and have that energy. I think as a centre forward, you've got a player that can be like the Gabriel Jesus that you kind of wanted. So you've got someone in a similar style to that. We did a podcast with Clive Palmer. We've got him talking about the 5 players that he thinks would be great. And in that whole podcast, I'd looked at Arsenal when Jesus first came through, and he was electric with those quick feet, quick zip to him in terms of his acceleration. And Tel, again, we've not seen enough of it, but could come and do a job in there that would be different maybe in certain games. What I think is really important to remember, and I've got Saka in the team at the moment, but obviously he's struggling. Let's put Tel on that side. What I really like about this is let's remember what we see from Arsenal. And what we see from Arsenal is the best, probably, rest defence in the Premier League. So kind of dominant in making the game be played in this half. But what I think happens is that for the opposition, I might just draw some X's here, they just get themselves set, and, you know, if you can stop the corners, and they can't always stop the corners, but if you can keep them quiet from that point of view, they're not really hurting you or taking a player out of the game. And Martinelli, for whatever reason, I don't feel like we're seeing that the same amount. What I really like about Tel is really comfortable when it's super congested in here. He'll be so familiar with that from his time at Bayern Munich against teams where they're dominating, high up the pitch, you know, owning the game, field through the, you know, dominating the field. And lots of players and lots of bodies in this area. Let's even do that, shall we? But also you're going to get these bodies in the box. And whoever's playing on that right wing, whoever it might be, they're looking to squeeze. This is literally how it gets to. So what I want from this player is a player that feels comfortable going this way and can put in a lovely cross. That's what I want. And that's what Arsenal want. That's what Arteta wants. If you think Saka, what do we see all the time? Comes back, lets the rest of the team drift into the box, puts that cross into the back post, and they score so many goals. And, you know, teams make them go round to the outside. So when you are round the outside, you need players that take players out of the game and affect the game. And what I like about him is that ability to come this way, but with that shake of the shoulders and that zip and those, he can get a yard and get a cross in. Sometimes he'll go all the way here, but sometimes he'll just put the cross in. And I don't see a problem with that at all. You know, add to the fact that, okay, Havertz isn't really doing it. It takes the pressure off Trossard a little bit, I think, who's just not totally that kind of player. Just more energy. And if you do need to mix it up, and even if you're brave enough to, like, say you take Rice out and put Tel here, you could bring Martinelli back in the fold here. You could play him here and play him with Havertz. That's another option that could absolutely do. And so, and I'm going to do a video on this. This pairing could be really nice because you've got one guy that's going to go this way and one guy that's going to go that way. I think those pairings are coming back massively. And I think he offers so much. Of course, he can come over this side, especially when Saka's out at the moment as well. So that could be really, really useful. Player that's, you know, happy to go down the line, happy to get into the box as well, because he does sniff it out. You might have understood by now. I think the right answer is Arsenal. Do you do it on a loan or do you just go and get it done? I would go and get it done. I think it would excite, but I think he offers the variety that Arteta needs. He's a different profile. Okay, he's not 6 foot, but do you need every player to be 6 foot? I don't think you do. And he has got a nice frame to him. I think Arsenal is the right answer. But he's not actually one of the 5 players that Clive put forward. So if you want to find out who that is, click right here. Subscribe while you're here.